Good afternoon, and thank you very much for the opportunity to address this distinguished conference. I'd like to congratulate, in particular, President Nakao, the leadership of the ADB, as well as its partners in USAID and the Korean Energy Agency for their magnificent orchestration of this important event. It's really a pleasure to be here. I'm very fortunate enough to be accompanied by four very talented colleagues from the IEA who are participating in many of the activities over the next few days. Mel Slade is with us, Louise Vickery, Caroline Lee, and Pirapat Vitaya. These represent some of our very best and most talented officials that work in the areas that are really most important to everyone here present. Energy efficiency, climate issues, resilience issues, system integration of renewables, and all of these issues are issues in which the countries of developing Asia who are here present are really going to set the tone for what happens worldwide. So that's also why we think that this conference is so important. Now, in the IEA itself, we've also been dedicating more importance to this region under our executive director, Fatih Birol, who was here a couple months ago to sign an MOU with the president of the ADB. And under Dr. Birol, we have a modernization strategy for the IEA. It has 3 pillars. And the first pillar is opening our doors more widely to partners in the developing world, in particular in developing Asia. So we have a new association program that's bringing us much closer to countries like China, India, Indonesia, Singapore, Thailand. We're all crafting much closer relationships with these countries. We're also reaching out to find ways in which our position as a clean energy hub and as a hub for energy efficiency can be strengthened, working also with partners in Asia. So it's very exciting to work with the ADB. We hope we can put some flesh on the bones of our MOU and to work with many people here that are here at this conference. Look forward to seeing you over the next couple of days. This afternoon, I'm going to talk about the results of our Energy Technology Perspectives study. This comes out every couple of years, and it tracks how the world is doing globally in terms of advancing clean energy technologies. As a point of departure, how are we doing right now? Where are we starting from? Well, it's been an interesting couple of years. We've heard before, renewables are making tremendous progress. In 2016, even more progress, supplying half of global energy demand. We also saw some interesting increases in nuclear power last year. As mentioned by Vivian, energy intensity, we're doing a bit better on intensity improvements. And in fact, in 2016, we had an improvement of 2.1%, which is good, not quite on track, but is pretty good. It was also mentioned by our Korean colleague, electric vehicle sales are up. Again, 40% this year, a new record, but still not enough. At the same time, we have some major challenges. Many of these were mentioned by the President and by Vivian. We still have a major energy access challenge. I won't say more about that because Vivian's covered that. Also, the energy sector itself is so critical in terms of the overall greenhouse gas emissions challenge, about 2/3 of that. And the energy sector also is important as a source of air pollution, and the IEA is devoting more resources to this issue as well. So looking ahead, we'll be looking at the technologies, we'll be looking at clean energy issues, we'll be looking at business models, we'll look at policies, markets, and technologies, and see where we're going. Now, one more general comment before we start, which is the IEA has also been measuring CO2 emissions, and for about 40 years, the trend was virtually one-on-one increases between global energy growth and global emissions growth. We didn't have very much in terms of the decoupling, but we have seen in the last 3 years that we've had a flattening of CO2 emissions worldwide, even though global energy growth has increased and the economy has increased. So from our perspective, it's too soon to say that this is a permanent trend. Most of our other numbers suggest that emissions are still on an upward trend, but it does suggest that there's some decoupling going on. Certainly, the US and China are moving ahead on decoupling. They were the major countries responsible for this flattening in 2016. Renewables obviously are playing a part. The role of natural gas displacing coal in the United States, that's had a macro impact. And we've also seen some shifts from coal to gas in China as well, in the industrial and buildings sector. But we're going to keep a very close look on this statistic in coming years to see if that trend can be sustained. Now, turning now to our technology scenarios, we map 3 scenarios out to 2060. Our reference technology scenario, again, what you're seeing here is global emissions going out to the future. And in terms of global emissions, we're still not seeing a peaking yet. And in fact, on the basis of the NDCs that have already been announced, we think that the global temperature will still go up to about 2.7 degrees by 2100. So we're not in the 2-degree scenario quite yet. We have modeled the 2-degree scenario. We've modeled it for many years, and we did an updated model this past year. And you could see that you'll need to bend that curve very, very substantially with an early peaking as early as 2020, with very, very substantial declines in emissions starting at that point. And again, as we've pointed out several times in many presentations, about 3/4 of those declining emissions would have to be taken up by increasing attention to renewables and energy efficiency. Those are the main anchors of these shifts. Of course, we're not there yet on the policies to support this. But this year, we also modeled a beyond 2 degrees scenario, a more ambitious scenario, more in keeping with the Paris targets. And that, of course, would entail an even sharper decline in emissions, very, very, very ambitious. And we believe it would entail a much larger role for carbon capture and storage, CCS, simply because to get those last gigatons out of the system, there are sectors in which it would be very, very difficult to decarbonize without the CCS, in particular the industrial sector. So a big challenge, a rather daunting challenge ahead in terms of this analysis. Now, we also released in Bonn last week our more specific tracking of technology by technology, which technologies are on track in terms of the 2-degree scenario based on recent trends. So we still see several technologies that are in red, which are considerably behind, that are not on track. Among those, more efficient coal-fired power. We're not talking here about coal power with CCS. We're just talking about more advanced coal technologies. But the concern here is that about 30% of the new coal capacity additions in 2015 were still using the low-efficiency subcritical technology. And this is quite problematic. So we would need to see a leap to the supercritical technologies quicker. It's not coming quick enough. Carbon capture and storage, as I mentioned, we have a global portfolio of large-scale projects, but the pipeline has stalled. We haven't seen the targeted policy incentives yet in place to drive larger-scale projects. So this is also quite problematic. Biofuels, also transport biofuels, we think they need to scale up considerably, largely for aviation, but we haven't gotten there yet. We've had some first-of-a-kind commercial-scale plants, but the mandates have not been in place, and the market, the competition with fossil fuels, with gasoline and diesel, the low price, has really hurt the biofuels. And finally, on buildings, building codes in developing world, it's moving ahead, but still we have 2/3 of countries without mandatory building energy codes. So this is also an area where we are behind. In terms of the area where we are neutral, sort of in the middle, nuclear energy, we saw some new capacity additions, quite a few last year, but we had very few new starts. So this could mean that we'll be doing worse in the coming years. Overall, renewable power, what's called other renewable power, outside of solar and wind, and I'll talk about this later, we're falling behind. Solar and onshore wind are doing well, but the other renewables are not. Industrial sector also needs more help. Appliances and lighting and fuel economy in terms of light vehicles. So there's some progress, but not enough. And finally, the areas where we are actually on track, the success stories that everybody knows about. Solar PV, again, fantastic uptake, huge price declines, the auctions that were mentioned, onshore wind as well, doing very well. Energy storage, we're seeing tremendous uptakes in energy storage, driven by favorable policy environments, reductions in battery prices. I'll have more to say about that later. And also electric vehicles, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slides. But we saw, again, good movement there. Shifting now to the specific technologies, solar and wind, solar PV and wind, leading to transitions. We've heard about this before, but the particular message I would note is we do think, and the IEA has done some interim tracking, not just the tracking out to 2040, but some interim tracking up to 2025. And we think we're fully on track also for our nearer term goals. So we are very optimistic in terms of solar PV and wind. As I mentioned before, though, these won't make up for the slower movement in some of the other technologies, the other renewable technologies and other low carbon generation sources. These are moving a bit slower. Hydro, offshore wind, solar thermal power, not moving as quickly. Bioenergy, geothermal, and ocean energy, all falling short. So that leaves our overall renewables target not met, even though our solar PV and onshore is met. Can this be pushed forward? It's possible, but it would require tremendous effort. And you can see in the top bar there, the average capacity additions, in particular to get to the beyond 2 degree scenario, would require a very, very substantial effort. We talked about systems integration. We have one of our experts here. But we do need to move away, again, from this one-directional electricity, energy delivery philosophy. We need to move towards a more distributed energy system. We think this will be coming. More interlinkages will be needed. We'll need some system changes in the way we think. This is covered substantially in our report, the way in which we need to change our energy systems, utilize more distributed energy, use more decentralized solutions, and what that means in terms of management of the electricity system. Storage, again, has been, I think, a positive story. We've seen some fairly substantial increases in terms of what we call the non-pumped hydro electricity storage in the electricity system. The good news is that the cost of these utility batteries been reduced by about 80% since 2010. That's very good. And we think also the expected growth of the EV sector will help cause a continued acceleration in the development of the batteries, also in the power sector. However, you can see from this other chart that the pumped hydro storage still represents by far the bulk of the installed storage capacity, and we think that will continue to be the case, even if we have a rapid increase in battery storage for electricity. It's going to take some time. However, looking beyond 2025, these charts only go to 2025, but looking out to, say, 2040, 2050, we are expecting that consumer scale behind-the-meter batteries will actually end up becoming a huge source of growth. It will be larger than batteries deployed by utilities. And in order to get to that beyond 2-degree scenario, those batteries in electricity systems will need to overtake all other forms of storage. But that's looking out to 2040, 2050. So what's happening then with battery storage more broadly, looking ahead? So transport, EV sales, we think, are going to drive the technology learning and the cost reductions in batteries in every single one of our scenarios. And since batteries are scaling up quickly from a low base, you can see that's the 2-degree scenario, and that would be the beyond 2-degree scenario. There will be a key technical challenges to drive costs all the way down to what would be necessary to enable that beyond 2-degree scenario. So it would be a major hurdle. We need to get those storage capacities up, but there will be major hurdles in getting to that point. Electric vehicles, we heard before that the 2 million threshold was achieved in 2016. This was a big achievement. Again, we had 1 million vehicles in 2015, so the growth is expanding quickly, but of course electric vehicles are still only 0.2% of the global fleet. There are not very many in circulation. China has been very, very dynamic in this space. They surpassed the United States in 2016, and I would note that these figures here are just passenger vehicles, which are the most important category, but China also leads in the other 3 categories of electric vehicles, the 2-wheelers, the electric buses, as well as the low-speed electric vehicles. And these are all technologies that have not been tracked. We are covering them now in our electric vehicles report, but they're not globally tracked very carefully in any other publication. But they have huge potential for not only China, but the rest of developing Asia, especially when it comes to solutions that can help out with respect to air pollution. So the IEA sees these technologies as extremely interesting. Looking ahead at the role that electric vehicles would have to play in the larger fleet, not just cars, but also trucks. You can see from these charts that looking ahead to 2060, those are the 2 middle bars, you would need a very substantial expansion of electric vehicles, not only in the light-duty vehicles, but also in the heavy-duty vehicles. I should say you would need that type of low-emission vehicles. So this is going to require a huge policy change. And I think the other point here is that when you get to the beyond 2 degrees scenario, in order to undertake other sorts of policy changes that would be involved there, and in particular, the expansion of mass transport, the actual number of vehicles goes down. You can't get, in our view, to a beyond 2 degree scenario with the same size of the vehicle fleet that you have today. You need other systemic changes in terms of urbanization, and that's what's behind the lower bar here on the third chart. Let's move quickly to the issue of buildings efficiency. We talked about that before. Rapid growth in the building sector will lead to a large increase in energy demand, especially in emerging economies under different scenarios. But it's interesting to note that if you shift to the below 2 degrees scenario, which is the third graph here, the energy efficiency advances actually enable you to make the pie smaller. So while you electrify more, and again, increased electrification is central to all of the analyses in our beyond 2 degree scenario, more end-use sectors need to be electrified, but not only do more end-use sectors need to be electrified, but overall demand also needs to come down if you're ever going to get anywhere near a below 2 degree scenario. Turning now to the industrial sector, the big question is, can we change technology in such a way that materials are produced more sustainably? I'm not going to get into any great detail on this. It's covered in the report. But we take a close look at this question of material efficiencies. Can we develop different kinds of low-carbon innovative processes that can drive down the emissions in these industrial sectors? And if so, at what cost? But they will be needed. They will be needed if we're going to drive down emissions towards the beyond 2 degree scenario. And finally, bioenergy. Bioenergy figures very prominently in all the IEA scenarios. Our view is that, in particular, in transport, it's necessary to meet large amounts of the upcoming demand, but it plays a role as well in other sectors of the economy. The question that we have in the IEA, what we've been struggling with, is the sustainability of this bioenergy. Is it possible to create enough biomass feedstocks in a sustainable way to meet the needs that you would need to have if you're going to that below 2 degree scenario? And our judgment has been that we need to cap, we simply need to impose a numerical cap on the available biomass at about 145 exajoules. You'll see that in the right column, because beyond that, we have constraints in terms of land use and other reasons. So biomass needs to increase, but it can't go too far. Carbon capture and storage, we mentioned this before, that increases are needed. The IEA is persuaded, and we are discussing this today in the Clean Energy Ministerial in Beijing. We have a separate session on this, but we're persuaded that the deployment here has been too slow. It remains behind where it should be, and there are policy and commercial issues associated with this, but that we really do need an intensified push on CCS. We need more attention, we need more resources, we need more policy support, more commercial support. And this doesn't mean simply a carbon price. Some people have suggested, well, you get the carbon price right and this will happen by itself. But we don't think that that's the case. We think it will also need to be additional supporting policies. We need to develop, for example, CO2 transportation networks. We need governments to bring stakeholders together because, frankly, the consumers and the producers of this material are not the same. It has some of the same challenges as energy efficiency. It's a wide group of stakeholders. So, and we think that it's not just restricted to power. Power, of course, has been the area that's been focused on. But power may have other options. Maybe we can get to even higher shares of renewables in power. It's possible. But other areas, cement, steel, chemicals, there don't seem to be similar kinds of options. So we do think that these very, very deep, when you get to the deep, deep emissions reductions, that there's no alternative except for the CCS. And finally, we'll look a little bit at R&D, research and development expenditures. How are they doing, both the private and the public side? So our conclusion is this past year, R&D spending in energy and clean energy was about $26 billion. A large portion of that was public. It's been flat for the past few years. But we also compare it to the R&D spending, the private spending, by just the three top IT firms in the world, Amazon, Google, and Intel. And these three companies spend a lot more on R&D than the entire energy sector. At the same time, we have a commitment through something called Mission Innovation that was launched at the Paris conference for the 22 governments that joined this effort to double their clean energy R&D spending over 5 years. That could bump up this total up to about $40 billion in 2021, which would be a very good thing. Hopefully it will happen. There will be a meeting today in Beijing of the Mission Innovation ministers to talk about how they're going to put these research programs into place. And of course, we're hoping the private sector will also do its part. We have the Breakthrough Energy Coalition, Bill Gates and his group that have also offered to match some of these increases. So we're hopeful on investment R&D and energy, but certainly there's a lot of room to go. So let me conclude by saying, again, we see some changes. There are some changes in energy technologies. It's a mixed bag. Progress in some areas is on track. In other areas, it's not. We are supporting this integrated system approach, especially when it comes to incorporating renewables and energy efficiency together. I think we're talking about this at the conference. In terms of countries, research and development, very, very important. Deployment support, also very, very important. We have looked at the scenario out to 2060, this 2-degree scenario, the beyond 2-degree scenario, very, very ambitious, would require many, many technologies working kind of at the same time in the same direction, extremely ambitious and a lot more policy support required. Innovation, again, is important, but it's a very steep road ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paul, for that very enlightening presentation on the deployment of various energy technologies and R&D. With that, Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the plenary session, opening plenary session. And please get back to your respective rooms by 4:10 to continue on the 4 parallel tracks we will have on energy access, energy efficiency, futures, and also renewable energy. And you will find the respective rooms in your program. Please get back to those rooms by 4:10. Thank you. Thank you very much.